Friends and foes of the Gene Keys, welcome to Gene Key of the Day. Today we are tuning into not only the transcendence of the butterfly and the beauty that is held inside of these potent times, but we're also going to continue to look at some of the concepts that we started to talk about on January 1st. Today we're going to deepen into some of them. So I want to start out by looking at this opposition between Uranus in Aries and Jupiter in Libra. We had the first direct opposition of this on the day after Christmas on December 26th, the final days of 2016. And we're going to have two more throughout 2017. So the next one will be March 2nd. And the final one will be September 28th. So throughout this year, these two planets are going to be playing a dance with each other. And oppositions, as much as they are, they sound challenging, like oppose, they're an opposing, they're opposites. They're also friends, right? It's like the programming partners in the Gene Keys. They are working together as like polar opposites of the ends of a battery to generate dynamic energy. So that's what oppositions are asking us to do, especially these long-term, ones that work over time, is they're both kind of influencing each other and trying to learn each other's lessons so there can be greater integration. So what are we integrating here? It's a great conversation. I mean, when you're working with Jupiter here, you have the expansive elements, gaining new perceptions, really seeking our truth, learning to develop our ethics, and the radical revolutionary and the new technologies that come online. So some of the meanings that I kind of bring is like, okay, expanded higher consciousness. That's definitely a positive outlook on that one. Advances in technology, and major mobilization of social movements. And right now, actually, across the United States and all major cities, as well as many other towns, there is a Women's March for Peace. So already we're seeing so much mobilization in response to President Trump being inaugurated yesterday and being elected as president. You start to see, wow, there's a lot of potency in these times, and there's a lot of potential with this particular aspect kind of coloring these times for organized movement. So let's talk about what gene keys are involved in this story, because I think that's fun. So Jupiter right now is in the 32nd gene key. And the 32nd gene key moves from failure to preservation and veneration at the city. And it's really all tied into our ancestry, our lineages, touching into our relations, and relatives really that go back through time, standing on the shoulders of those who came before us and really upholding the lineage. And it's this role of responsibility. So when we look at something like Jupiter expanding and really emphasizing and giving a lot of uplift into the arena of the 32, the question of the 32 becomes really important. And that is, what is it that we're preserving for the future? I really love that this key is involved in these really critical times, because it's a key that has its scope on the long-term view. And it has the capacity and the responsibility really to make decisions on what it is that we're leaving behind, that we've inherited, whether as a generation or as a member of a family and whatnot. And what are we letting go? What do we need to actually prune and change? And what do we need to preserve to live on for future generations? This is a really important question. And like I said, Jupiter, something that I recently learned from my astrology teacher, Antro Ali, and never really realized is that Jupiter is all about developing our ethics and coming to kind of learn like what we really care about. It's finding our truth, finding our philosophy. And so it's really cool to see this in conversation, and really direct conversation with Uranus, which really holds this kind of, I think because it's uranium, because it has so much technology and sort of the higher mind and where we're evolving in our intelligence as a species, and like the internet is a great example of Uranus in action. So it's sort of like developing a code of ethics around the technologies that we're using. Like we're really looking at a crazy future that's starting to hit us. Like this is real. We have AI, we have VR, virtual realities, and all the ways that the advancements of technologies are starting to launch into these very real, the technology, they're here, but are they rooted in the ethics of our values as a society, as a culture, as a humanity? So this is a great time to really bring in those qualities of how can we align? And almost, I'm an optimist, and Jupiter is an optimistic planet. So I like to look at it as this is a great opportunity for us to be, catalyzed into, and almost just it synchronizes with the already impending need for these conversations of ethics to be brought to the table. And it affects our future generations. So that's important. Now, Uranus is in the 42nd gene key. It has been for, I think, the last 6 months or so. We've been talking about it. And I just want to give a little flavor of that into this story. We've talked about Uranus in the 42 being like radical detachment. But let's go into that. The 42 at the shadow is... expectation. And it moves to the gift of detachment and into the city of celebration. And so down at the shadow here, this is where we get really attached to the stories and the dramas of our everyday life. And Uranus shakes stuff up. So this is a time where we're all of the places where we're attached to our identity and the story that we've created about the way things go and what it should look like, and all of the characters and things that are in place. It's really shaking up those stories. And it's time to really let our minds relax into the unknown and have a sense of radical detachment, where detachment really is just living from our center and being a witness to the world. And that requires us to not be attached to the outcome of what we want. Things might turn out and look differently than we expected or we think should be, which is some of the shadow aspects of Jupiter. Our belief systems that can turn into the dogmas that we live by are being broken down, like we talked about, by Uranus, who's an oppressor shaker offer. It just wants to like break free of oppression. So not only where have we been oppressed by our lineage and our belief systems within and dogmas within our lineage, but where have we been oppressed by our expectations of the way things should be? And letting go is the theme. Detachment is the master of letting go. And Uranus is the higher mind, so we have access to so much here. I'm really going off. This is already longer than I expected it to, but this is really juicy. So, I just want to close that part with this failure key. Like, it's almost like with the external drama playing out on the world stage, it's almost like we're facing our own imminent failure as a species to survive. And we are faced with that, and a lot of like the response to that is easily panic and anxiety. And let's get real. Like we can feel it. There's more panic and anxiety in the collective right now. So we have a responsibility within our own beings and own bodies, and then within our communities and our relationships, to breathe. And like we've talked about, drop into the living chi field, whatever movement, body practices that help you deal with fear and anxiety. Be practicing those things right now, because for me, I've personally found that to be incredibly helpful in moving through fear states. So the other thing I wanted to just mention, because it's so cool today, or yesterday, I think it's today, is the human design and Gene Key's New Year. So the sun actually just went into the 41st Gene Key, which is the start codon. And this is the beginning of the Rave New Year. My roommate Charlie did this amazing kind of horoscope for the year that I want to feature at some point because it's so insightful. And I'm not super into human design. I haven't studied it a lot, so I can't go into that. But what I can say is that it's the start codon. We're starting a new year right now, and there's all this access to fresh energy, as there kind of always is, but right now we just start playing the game that it is pronounced in a very real way in our game. And this also coincides with the Chinese New Year that happens on January 28th. And so this year, as I spoke of before, 2017 is the year of the fire rooster. And, I looked it up online and was just kind of peeking at like, oh, what's the fire rooster about? And qualities such as trustworthiness, punctuality, hardworking, strong-willed, proactive, able to really handle lots of tasks, multitasker. This definitely goes in line with the mobilization of the movement. We've got a lot of organizing, ambitious qualities that are driving the element of the Chinese New Year. Now, I don't claim to know much about this, but I did want to bring it back to this concept that I brought in last time about the fire cock, okay? So I just think of a phallus, can't help it, and the fire element being so yang that in my mind, I was like, wow, it's so yang, and we talked about that. And of course, Trump getting elected. So I brought about this concept of how when we go really far into an extreme, it brings about the opposite. And I wanted to bring in a concept that I discovered that maybe some of you know about. It's hard to even, I'm going to grab my computer. It's hard to know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's NTO Dramaaa. NTO Dramaaa, which in NTO is opposite, and Dramaaa is running course. So here's the Wikipedia definition. It's a principle that was introduced by psychiatrist Carl Jung that said that the superabundance of any force, the overemphasis, the superabundance of any force, yang, inevitably produces its opposite, yin. It's similar to the principle of equilibrium in the natural world, in that any extreme is opposed by the system in order to restore balance. So when things get to their extreme, they turn into the opposite. It's proof that my theory, the thought in my brain, is really a thing out there, and it happens in the natural world. Like wet things evaporate and dry. Cold turns into warm. This is the way things work. So I just want to end today with it's gonna be okay, the overly yang, the overly out of balance, and whatever you want to say in that, so many different words that we could put to that, because yang isn't inherently bad at all. It's an essential factor, but when it's out of balance, we have to bring it back in balance. So this is bringing about this continued and almost seems in a way even more true and grounded and real rise of the feminine and coming back into the yin ways of life, leading from our yin centers, the way that the water is heated by the fire, that the fire serves the water, so that the spirit of our infinite nature can really be the focal point of how life is moved, and that our wills and our egos are wonderful parts that get to serve the love and the beauty and all those wonderful things that we so love and cherish. So, Happy New Year. Happy 41. Happy Firecock. Happy inauguration of our new president. Happy mobilization of the movements and everything else. So much love.